Sweden's government has released a groundbreaking investigation into the future of the horse industry, addressing dressage, horse welfare, equality, youth participation, rural economies, and public health. In this video, we will break down the report, the Swedish Equestrian Federation's response, and why this could reshape the future of equestrian sport worldwide. For generations, horses have been part of the soul of Sweden, not just as athletes, not just as livestock, and not just as a sport. In Sweden, horses have long represented freedom, community, health, education, and identity. They exist in rural villages, suburban riding schools, breeding farms, racing stables, therapy programs, forests, and family traditions that stretch back generations. But now, Sweden is facing an uncomfortable question. What happens if the horse industry begins to disappear? Because behind the beauty of dressage arenas and the romantic image of Scandinavian riding culture, the equestrian world is under pressure like never before. Costs are rising, riding schools are struggling, young people are finding it harder to participate, professional horse workers are burning out, and public trust in equestrian sport has been shaken by growing welfare controversies around the world. That is why the Swedish government launched one of the most important equestrian investigations in recent memory. A national inquiry called A Stronger Horse Industry for Entrepreneurship, Equality, Inclusion, and Public Health. And honestly, this report could end up influencing the future of the horse world far beyond Sweden. Because this is not just a report about horses. It is a report about what kind of society Sweden wants to be. The investigation examines how the industry contributes to public health, rural economies, equality, youth development, employment, and social well-being. But it also asks difficult questions about sustainability, accessibility, education, welfare, and the long-term survival of horse culture itself. And perhaps the most surprising thing about the entire document is this. The Swedish government does not treat horses as a luxury hobby. It treats them as socially important. That changes everything. For decades, the horse industry has often existed in an awkward political space. Horses are too agricultural to fit neatly into sports policy, but too sporty to fit neatly into agriculture. Equestrianism is one of the few athletic environments dominated by women and girls. Yet it has often struggled to receive the same recognition as male-dominated sports. And the Swedish inquiry openly acknowledges that imbalance. The report highlights the horse industry's importance for equality and inclusion, especially because riding is one of the largest organized youth activities for girls in Sweden. That point matters far beyond Scandinavia, because across the world, equestrian sports are often misunderstood by outsiders. People frequently describe riding as elitist or inaccessible, while ignoring how many ordinary families sacrifice enormous amounts just to keep children involved in horses. Many riders wake up before school to muck stalls. Many parents work extra hours to pay lesson bills. Many stable workers stay in the industry despite exhausting physical labor and low wages, simply because they love horses. The report recognizes that reality, and honestly, that alone makes it feel different from any government discussions about equestrian sport. One of the strongest themes throughout the investigation is the idea that horses create value far beyond competition. The report repeatedly connects equestrian activities to public health and mental well-being. It argues that horses contribute positively to physical activity, social connection, confidence, education, and quality of life. Anyone who has spent time around horses already understands this instinctively. Horses teach patience, responsibility, discipline, empathy. They help shy children gain confidence. They help anxious people regulate emotions. They help isolate people from the community. For many riders, the stable becomes more than a place to ride. It becomes the place where they feel safest. And now the Swedish government is officially recognizing that social value. That is significant because governments rarely discuss horses in emotional or psychological terms. Usually, horses are discussed economically or agriculturally. But Sweden's inquiry repeatedly frames equestrian activities as beneficial for public well-being and community health. And the Swedish Equestrian Federation clearly understands how important this moment is. When responding to the government inquiry, the Federation praised what it calls the report's holistic perspective. That phrase matters because it reflects something horse people have known for years. Everything in the equestrian world is connected. Horse welfare affects public trust. Public trust affects participation. Participation affects riding schools. Riding schools affect education pathways. Education affects professional standards, and professional standards affect the future of the industry itself. The Federation particularly welcomed proposals involving education, youth participation, and improved facility support. And honestly, infrastructure may become one of the defining horse industry issues of the next 20 years. Because horses need physical space. They need trails, pasture lands, barns, riding arenas, transport routes, accessible facilities. You cannot replace a stable with an app. You cannot digitize horse culture. And as urban development expands across Europe and beyond, equestrian spaces are increasingly disappearing. The Swedish Equestrian Federation supported proposals for increased funding for equestrian facilities and the creation of a national facility fund because many riding centers are struggling to survive financially. That issue is becoming critical across the horse world. If riding schools disappear, access disappears. If access disappears, participation shrinks. And if participation shrinks, the future of the industry becomes fragile. The report also addresses another major concern, labor shortages and professional sustainability. Who will become the next riding instructors? Who will shoe horses? Who will breed future generations? Who will become veterinarians? Who will maintain equestrian facilities? These are not abstract questions anymore. Many sectors within the horse industry are already struggling to attract and retain workers. Long hours, physical strain, and financial instability have pushed many talented people out of equestrian careers entirely. And the report openly acknowledges that passion alone cannot sustain an industry forever. That statement feels especially important because horse industries around the world often rely on sacrifice. People stay because they love horses, not because the working conditions are easy. But eventually, burnout catches up with people. Sweden's investigation argues that stronger education systems, better professional support, and long-term planning are essential if the horse industry is going to survive in the future. At the same time, discussions about the future of horses can no longer be separated from horse welfare itself. And this is where the conversation becomes even more interesting. Sweden has increasingly become one of the strongest welfare-focused voices in an international equestrian sport. In 2024, the Swedish Equestrian Federation introduced several welfare-centered rule changes that attracted global attention. Nosebands became optional in Swedish dressage. Rising trot was allowed in more classes. Young horses were required to receive mandatory breaks between competitions. These were not random rule changes. They reflected a broader cultural shift happening within Scandinavian equestrianism, a growing belief that horse welfare must become central to the future of the sport. And Sweden did not stop there. The Swedish, Norwegian, Danish, and Finnish equestrian federations jointly contacted the FEI with concerns about horse welfare, training methods, and the future credibility of equestrian sport. The Nordic federations warned that equestrian sport's social license to operate depends on meaningful welfare reform. That phrase, social license to operate, has become incredibly important in modern horse sport because public trust is no longer guaranteed. Videos of controversial training methods spread globally within minutes. Questions about hyperflexion, Young horse pressure, judging standards, and ethical training are now part of mainstream discussion, inside and outside of the horse world. And honestly, Sweden appears more willing than many countries to confront those realities directly. The Nordic federations even questioned the role of young horse championships and called for greater transparency in dressage judging. Those are not small conversations. Those are foundational questions about the future identity of equestrian sport itself. And when you connect those welfare debates to Sweden's new government inquiry, a much larger picture begins to emerge. Sweden is simply not just trying to protect horse businesses. It is trying to rethink what a sustainable horse industry actually looks like, economically, socially, ethically, and culturally. How do you preserve horse culture while adapting to changing public expectations? How do you keep riding accessible while still protecting horse welfare? How do you maintain public trust in elite sport while also supporting grassroots participation? Those are difficult questions, but Sweden is at least asking them. And honestly, many countries are not even doing that yet. The report also highlights something that is often overlooked entirely by the general public. The horse industry is economically enormous. Horses support entire networks of employment and rural development. Veterinarians, feed companies, farrier, tourism businesses, breeding farms, construction companies, transport services, competition venues, agricultural suppliers. The economic ecosystem surrounding horses stretches far beyond competition arenas. Yet because the industry is fragmented across many sectors, governments often underestimate its total value. Sweden's inquiry tries to connect all of those pieces together, and perhaps that is the most important takeaway from the entire report. It recognizes that horses are not just hobbies. They are part of public health, part of rural identity, part of youth development, part of education, and part of the emotional lives of thousands of people. But the report also delivers a warning. None of this is guaranteed to survive automatically. If riding becomes too expensive, participation declines. If professionals cannot earn sustainable incomes, expertise disappears. If facilities vanish, communities collapse. And if equestrian sports fail to maintain public trust regarding horse welfare, the social support that sustains the industry could weaken dramatically. That is why this report matters far beyond Sweden, because the entire horse world is facing many of the same pressures. Questions about welfare, questions about accessibility, questions about elitism, questions about sustainability. And perhaps Sweden is simply one of the first countries trying to confront all of those issues at once. The government's inquiry does not solve every problem, but it does something important. It acknowledges that horses matter, not just emotionally, structurally, economically, socially, and culturally. And maybe most important of all, it recognizes that the future of the horse industry cannot survive on tradition alone. It must also survive on trust. Trust from the public, trust from riders, trust that horses are being protected, and trust that future generations will still have the opportunity to experience what horses can bring into human lives. Because beyond the politics, the economics, and the debates, the heart of this issue remains surprisingly simple. Horses still matter to people, and Sweden is trying to make sure they continue to matter for generations to come.